The prairie wind carried dust along the rutted trail, swirling around the creaking wheels of a lone wagon. Its driver, a tall cowboy with weathered features and steady eyes, guided the reins with quiet patience. He had traveled this road many times before, hauling supplies between distant towns. But today, something unseen lingered in the air, watchful, desperate. From the edge of a thicket just beyond the trail, a figure crouched low. Her breath came sharp and shallow, heart hammering in her chest. She was young, perhaps no more than 20, though hardship had carved lines of exhaustion into her face. Her dark hair hung in loose tangles, and her dress, once simple but decent, was torn at the sleeves and frayed at the hem. Dirt clung to her bare arms and the curve of her cheek. In her hand she clutched a small knife, its edge dulled and chipped from years of neglect. She had not always been like this. Once there had been family, laughter, meals that filled more than just her stomach, but loss had stripped her of those comforts, leaving her with hunger as her only constant companion. For 3 days she had gone without more than a sip of creek water, and the weakness had driven her here, to this choice she would never have imagined making. The wagon rattled closer. The horse's snorts and the rhythmic squeak of the axles grew louder, until she felt them in her bones. Fear clawed at her throat, but hunger was fiercer still. She stepped from the brush, planting herself in the road, knife trembling in her grip. "Stop!" Her voice cracked, a mixture of command and pleading. The cowboy drew back the reins, his horse stamping as the wagon rolled to a halt. Dust drifted in the air between them, settling slowly as if time itself had paused. He took in the sight before him, a thin, desperate woman blocking his path with a blade that shook so badly it might slip from her hand at any moment. Her eyes burned with defiance, but underneath the fire lay terror. "Food," she whispered hoarsely, louder this time. "Give me food, or I'll take it." The cowboy didn't move to draw his gun. He didn't even shift in his seat. Instead, he studied her in silence, the kind of silence that unsettled more than threats. In that stillness, the girl's pulse raced faster. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down, and though she tried to appear dangerous, tears stung the corners of her eyes. She wasn't a thief, not truly. She was just hungry, and desperate enough to try. The wagon wheels creaked softly as the cowboy steadied his horse. Dust still lingered in the sunlight, curling around the thin figure who stood blocking his way. The girl's knife shook in her grip, though she tried to hold it steady. Her knuckles were white, her breath uneven. The cowboy rested one gloved hand against his thigh. He didn't reach for his revolver. He didn't even shift in the saddle. Instead, his calm, steady voice broke the silence. "You sure about this?" The question was gentle, but it cut sharper than steel. Her jaw tightened. She raised her chin higher, though her shoulders sagged under invisible weight. "I don't have a choice," she snapped, though the words cracked like glass. "It's you or me. I need what you've got." The cowboy's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in quiet study. He could see it in her, how her dress hung loose against her thin frame, how her lips trembled with more than bravado. This wasn't a hardened bandit. This was someone who hadn't eaten in days. Still, he didn't let his guard down. He leaned forward slightly, his voice slow and even. "If you were a real outlaw, you'd already have that knife to my throat. So I'll ask again, are you sure?" Her breath hitched. For a heartbeat, she faltered, but desperation stiffened her spine again. She waved the knife clumsily toward the wagon bed, where sacks of grain and a water barrel rested. "Just give me what I need. I'll go. You won't see me again." The cowboy tilted his head, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "And if I don't?" Her throat tightened. She tried to glare, tried to make her small frame loom larger than it was. "Then I'll take it." But even as she said it, her voice betrayed her. The cowboy studied her another moment before shaking his head softly. "That blade won't scare me, miss. Hunger's a meaner weapon than any steel, and I can see it's eating you alive." Her grip faltered just for an instant. She clenched harder, forcing strength she didn't feel. The crowd of her memories, of empty nights, of cold mornings, pressed her forward. She couldn't back down, not now. But for the first time, she realized he wasn't mocking her. He was reading her, seeing through her. And that unsettled her more than any drawn gun. The silence between them stretched long, broken only by the restless shuffle of the horse and the faint creak of the wagon's wood. The girl's hand trembled around the knife, but her eyes, wide, defiant, and desperate, locked on the cowboy. Then, with a calmness that unsettled her more than a drawn gun ever could, he reached down, pulled a burlap sack from the wagon bed, and set it gently on the ground. The heavy thump startled her. "Go on," he said, voice steady. "Take it." Her brows pinched together. She hadn't expected this. No fight, no bargaining, no anger. Just surrender. She edged closer, knife still raised, though her arm sagged from fatigue. Kneeling, she grabbed the sack and opened it slightly. Dried beans, cornmeal, a few strips of jerky wrapped in cloth. Her breath caught. Food, enough to last weeks if rationed. She looked back up at him, suspicion clouding her eyes. "Why?" The cowboy leaned back in the saddle, one hand resting loosely on the horn. "Because I can see you're not robbing me for greed. You're robbing me to survive. That's a difference most folks overlook." Her throat tightened. No one had ever bothered to see her reasons. The townsfolk had called her a thief, a stray, a burden better left forgotten. But here was this stranger, giving her what she'd tried to take without a second thought. Her knife lowered, though she still clutched it as though it were the last piece of pride she owned. "You think I'm weak?" "No," he replied, shaking his head. "I think you're stronger than most. Takes grit to face a man with nothing but a blade and an empty stomach. But strength don't mean you should fight alone." The words hit harder than she expected. She swallowed, feeling the sting of shame press hot against her chest. "I didn't want to ask," she admitted, voice breaking. "Nobody ever gives without taking something back." The cowboy's eyes softened. "Maybe that's because you've been asking the wrong people." For the first time, her hand fell to her side. The knife hung loose, her last defense slipping away as the truth sank in. She had tried to rob him, but instead she found herself robbed of her anger. And in its place, something dangerous, something she hadn't felt in years, began to spark. Hope. The cowboy nudged his horse closer, his voice low but sure. "You forgot one thing when you took that sack." Her head jerked up, startled. "What's that?" He tipped his hat, a faint smile on his lips. "My last name." The girl froze, unsure if she had misheard him. His words lingered in the night air, heavier than the sack of food she clutched in her arms. "My last name." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had spent so long nameless, known only as orphan, stray, or worse. A last name was something she had never been offered, never believed she deserved. The cowboy swung down from his saddle, boots crunching against the dirt. He moved slow, measured, so as not to startle her. The horse snorted softly, watching the exchange as if it too knew something important was unfolding. "You don't understand," she stammered, tightening her grip on the sack. "I'm not like you. I'm not like anyone. I take what I can and run before someone hurts me for it. That's all I know." The cowboy crouched down until his weathered face was level with hers. The firelight from the wagon lantern flickered across his jaw, etching shadows that made his expression both stern and kind. "And maybe," he said slowly, "it's time you learned something else." Her heart hammered in her chest. His tone carried no judgment, no mockery, only the kind of certainty that made her want to believe him. But belief was dangerous. Belief got people hurt. She shook her head fiercely. "If I stay, if I trust you, it'll end the same way it always does. People leave. People die. I can't." Her voice cracked, and she turned her face away, ashamed of the tears that threatened to fall. The cowboy's silence stretched, but it wasn't the silence of rejection. Instead, it was patient, like he was giving her space to wrestle with a truth she didn't want to face. Finally he spoke, voice quiet but unyielding. "I can't promise I won't fall. None of us can. But what I can promise is this. While I'm breathing, you won't face this world alone. Not anymore." Her fingers loosened around the sack, trembling as if the weight had shifted. Not just of the food, but of the years she had carried on her own shoulders. She risked a glance at him, searching his eyes for the lie she expected to find. But there was none. Only steady conviction. The girl drew a shaky breath. "You'd give me your name?" "Just like that?" "Not just like that," he replied, standing and offering her his hand. "You'd have to take it." Her gaze lingered on his hand, rough, scarred. A working man's hand, but extended to her like a bridge across a canyon she had never thought could be crossed. For the first time in years, she considered stepping onto it. The girl stared at his hand for what felt like forever. Her pulse raced, her stomach knotted, and the sack of food pressed heavy against her chest. It should have been simple. Take the food, run into the night, survive another day. That was what she always did. That was safe, but now safety felt like a chain, and his hand looked like freedom. Her breath hitched. "If I take it," she whispered, "what happens then?" The cowboy didn't flinch. "Then you stop being nobody. You stop being a ghost in a world that pretends not to see you. You become someone. By someone." The word struck her like a lightning bolt. Her first instinct was to scoff, to push him away before he could pull her close and hurt her like everyone else had. But deep inside, where the child she used to be still hid, something fragile stirred. Her grip tightened on the sack, her eyes darting to the dark road beyond the wagon. She could run. She knew every shadow, every trick. But if she ran, she'd be nothing more than the same lonely figure stumbling through the dust. And if she stayed, the thought terrified her more than any danger she'd ever faced. The cowboy lowered his hand slightly, but not in defeat. His voice remained steady, like a river that refused to dry. "You've got two choices tonight. Keep running until there's nothing left of you, or take a chance on me, on a name, on a place to belong." Her throat burned. For years, the world had told her she was worth less than nothing. Yet this man was offering her more than everything she ever dared imagine. Finally, trembling, she let the sack fall to the ground. The thud echoed louder than a gunshot in the night. She reached out, hesitant at first, then firmer, her small hand slipping into his calloused palm. The cowboy's fingers closed gently around hers, firm enough to anchor but soft enough not to bind. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like prey or a thief. She felt chosen. A sob escaped her lips, but it wasn't from despair, it was from release. The years of hunger, fear, and abandonment seemed to wash away in that single touch. The cowboy gave her hand the faintest squeeze. "That's it," he murmured. "You've taken the first step." And though she didn't yet know what tomorrow would bring, for the first time, she dared to believe it might not be a fight she faced alone. The night air was cool, as the cowboy helped her onto the wagon seat beside him. She moved stiffly, like someone unused to sharing space, unused to trusting that she belonged anywhere. The horse shifted beneath the reins, and with a gentle nudge, they rolled forward along the moonlit trail. For a long while, she said nothing. The creak of the wheels and the steady clop of hooves filled the silence. She clutched her thin shawl around her shoulders, still wary, still half afraid he might change his mind. Turn her away like all the others, but he didn't. He just drove on, patient as the stars above. Finally, she dared to glance at him. His profile was lined and rugged, his hat tipped low, but his presence radiated something she had never known: steadiness. He was not a man of many words, she realized, but when he spoke, he meant them. Her chest tightened. She had spent her whole life chasing scraps of kindness, surviving on scraps of food. And now one stranger's steady hand had shifted her world. "You really mean it," she said softly, almost to herself. The cowboy kept his gaze on the trail, but a faint smile curved his lips. "I don't say things I don't mean." Her eyes prickled, but this time she didn't fight the tears. They slid down her cheeks in silence. Not the hot, angry tears of being mocked or unwanted, but the cleansing kind that washed away years of loneliness. By dawn, the horizon blushed with streaks of rose and gold. She blinked at the sight, the new day unfurling before her like a promise. The cowboy reined the horse to a stop near a ridge. Below stretched endless open land, quiet and waiting. "This is where I start again," he said. "And if you're willing, it can be where you start again, too." She gripped the edge of the seat, staring out at the wide expanse. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with something new. Possibility. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll try." The cowboy glanced at her, and for the first time she smiled. A small, uncertain smile, but real. As the sun climbed higher, she realized something had shifted forever. She was no longer just a nameless orphan drifting through a cruel world. She had taken a hand, accepted an anchor. For the first time, she wasn't running from the past. She was riding toward a future,